The third icon in the record of our beliefs is the Crucifixion. All of the icons here guide us on a journey through the Creed. The baptism, the Ascension, Pentecost, Trinity, the Annunciation, the Crucifixion, the Resurrection affirm what we believe. They affirm that the Word of God became flesh, and here in the Crucifixion, we have further affirmation of this act of self-emptying for our sake. The words written at the top of the cross come from the Gospel of John. For this cause, to this hour, I came. Do we understand that we are the reason for this act, and that now is the hour when Jesus is with us in our struggles, our suffering, our addictions, our sinfulness, our pain, as well as our joy? How does this affirmation show up here in this icon of the crucified Christ? Well, haven't we all grown up with images of the crucifixion that seem to lean heavily toward the pain and torture of Jesus? I certainly have, and in my studies in art, recognize this as a bias in the images of Catholic churches. There certainly are a few examples that differ, such as the San Damiano cross of St. Francis of Assisi that hangs in the chapel here, where Christ is shown in the icon as fully dead, yet with eyes wide open, fully alive. Because in the icons of the crucifixion, Christ is always depicted as fully alive and fully dead, while in most Catholic churches, the crucifix places a heavy emphasis on the physical reality of Christ crucified. In all the pain and blood of the event, in icons we see the divinity and humanity of Christ equally represented. Both aspects of the incarnation are always present in any icon of Jesus. Notice the figure of Jesus. His 7-foot-tall body seems to float on the cross, as though he is stepping off of the cross to come toward us, and with arms outstretched to embrace us. His flesh is not ripped and torn, but seems whole and well, even though he bears the wounds of his torture. His face is turned toward the front, as are all faces in icons. And the face of Christ is tranquil and glows from within. Interestingly, faces in icons of those who are not redeemed or who are evil are drawn in profile. An example of this would be the face of Judas at the Last Supper. The head of Christ is surrounded by a halo, perfect circle, but in it is drawn a cross. This is due to the symbolic nature of the halo itself, which represents the brilliance of divine life, but it also represents the crucifixion. The cross within the halo of Christ is only shown on icons of Christ. And it too emerges from the geometry we learned about in the icon of the Annunciation. Again, one more module of the nose that was used in constructing the face is used to construct the halo. Halos, which are symbolic of the sun, but in this halo that surrounds the head of Christ, we also have the cross. And in the cross, there are 3 Greek letters that are the abbreviation for I am. Here we have a link between the Old and New Testament. Remember, the question put to Yahweh by Moses was, "Who are you?" And the reply of God to Moses was, "I am." Here in the cross in the halo that encircles the head of Christ, we have the reply of Jesus to a similar question. Very truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am. And then, notice the letters on either side of his head. These are always on icons of Christ and are the abbreviations, again in Greek, of his name, Jesus Christ. So now let us consider the figures that stand at the foot of the cross. Mary, the Mother of God, and John the Beloved. Notice that their eyes are wide open, gazing at love at what they see. Their noses are long and thin, symbolizing nobility and inner sweetness. And their mouths are small and closed in silent contemplation. The fact that they do not smile is a perennial stumbling block to individuals who are unfamiliar with icons. So let me start by suggesting how powerful a smile can be. First of all, there are many kinds of smiles, from joyful and sincere to sarcastic and downright evil, with everything in between. Regardless of the type of smile we encounter in another, it does something to change us. We may feel joyful or affirmed, mocked, or like running away. But faces in icons don't smile, nor do they scowl, scold, hector, or laugh. Why is that? They do it because by not smiling, they give us the interior freedom to feel our own feelings. Then, think about the line from Psalm 46 that tells us to be still and know that I am God. The figures themselves are calm and still. As the Mother of God leans slightly toward her Son, her figure seems to dematerialize under her garments. Again, the human form is transfigured and spiritualized. It is not negated at all, but rendered in authentic fullness. The gesture of her right hand both directs our gaze toward Jesus in compassionate love and toward her heart in a gesture of her own grief and pain for her Son. And John the Beloved stands before us as a young man, with a young man's bewilderment at both this death as well as the command that he take Mary under his roof and under his protection. He rests his head upon his hand in silent contemplation, while his other hand falls at his side in a gesture of surrender to the will of God. Traditionally, the color of his garments are similar to Mary's, with a blue tunic reflecting his sanctity underneath, and a red cloak of his human nature wrapped around his body. Over his shoulder is a gold band of authority that is taken from the ancient world, for only the good, the powerful, or the wise were allowed to have these woven into their tunics. And now may I direct your attention to the foot of the cross, where we see a pile of rocks, a cave, and a skull and bones. Next to the unsmiling faces in the icon, this part of the icon seems to give people the most difficulty. So where does this come from? In fact, it is from the Passion narrative in the Gospel of St. Matthew. At that moment, the moment that Jesus died, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split open. The tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. The rocks, of course, refer to Golgotha, to the gates of hell, to the place of skull and bones, which leads us to our next icon and the figures in the Old Testament in the resurrection icon.